Hello there, and welcome back to War Thunder to another tank review and another top tier tank at that. In this case, the Leclerc S2, new top end of the line French main battle tank. And to give you the TLDR version, at this moment it's a pretty hard tank to sell. Not because it is bad, but it's just not outstanding, and there is no real big difference to its predecessor. There is no better shell, there is no real advantage in mobility or armor, and that is a good tank. You can extend your top tier French lineup with it, but 400,000 RP to get another stock tank, and then to just have, for further grinding obviously, Commander's thermals, I'm not quite sure. Would not be the best deal for me. But anyway, it's been a while since I had a look at a Leclerc in the first place, and after all, they are beautiful tanks, especially with the skin. So without further ado, let's have a look at this tank. As usual, let's start with the armor, and let's start with the lower glacis, which is only 50mm thick, and there is no composite armor behind it. The only thing that can kind of troll enemies when they shoot with you with very powerful heat, such as ATGMs or APFSDS, is here this beak and then the upper frontal glacis because of the angle and a bit of composite armor. Then we go to the side, and while this looks like serious add-on side armor, it doesn't really matter. First of all, there is a serious gap here where the frontal drive wheel is, so APFSDS will be inserted here and blow up the tank. And here the armor is relatively thin, 10mm, and the main armor is only 30mm, going down to 20mm where the engine is. So this is not really that thick. A lot of SPA, or most SPA, can actually go through this quite easily. And the same is here with the rear of the hull, 10, 20 and 5mm respectively. So this tank is not really well protected when it comes to only steel armor. And yeah, then also going back to here, this composite screen, even APFSDS goes through this rather quickly. It can help you versus IFVs, I get that, but again, IFVs just shoot under the turret, or they shoot below that and blow the tank up. It's there, I guess, and can help you to absorb certain shots when you're angled and they're not properly aimed. They are not your lord and savior. That's what I tried to say. Then we come to the turret, and it looks like there is some serious bulky hull down protection system at work, but obviously when you look closer to it, it's very thin in terms of steel. But we are talking here about composite armor, right? And yeah, you can see there is really nothing to protect the driver when you shoot the lower glacis. The upper glacis, it can absorb stuff such as normal heat shells, 120 and 125mm. It can absorb the weaker APFSDS sometimes, or they just bounce off and then go into the turret. But even the turret is protected here a bit better from the side. But again, on the hull, there is nothing. The fuel tank can troll a little bit with the enemies here and there, but you shouldn't rely on this. And you can see there is a big ammo rack just where the gun exits the turret, just below that. And the thing is, really powerful heat, such as from ATGMs from 850mm and onwards, maybe even a bit lower, can go through this composite armor like a hot knife through butter. And that's before we talk about here this huge plating, which is basically just air. Yeah, the gun mantlet is the usual weak spots. We also have here the turret ring, which is weak, and it's a 50-50 really. It's a coin toss if you just shoot at the silhouette of the tank, if you hit the part where there is composite armor or not. And when you are in something like the 2A6 with its top shell, you wouldn't care in the first place, because that also would go through here this composite screen when I tested this. And so I would say versus really weak APFSDS such as 105, it can troll it, but serious hard hitting 120 APFSDS and the likes just goes through. So the protection is not the tank's real strength. Then survivability. Well, it's a bit good and bad. The bad is that we only have 3 crew members, so we have the driver, the commander, and the gunner, 2 of them in the turret, just like with the Type 10 or a lot of the Soviet-like main battle tanks. The rear ammo is big, and it's a ready rack, and if I did not miscount, it's 22 plus the one in the gun bridge, it's 23, and it has a working blowout panel, except if the APFSDS or whatever pens it and compromises it therefore. And we also have here under the turret a good portion where there is nothing and you just could shoot in theory something through, as long as it is not APHE, and just the tank doesn't really take that much damage. Big power pack in the back, by the way. And yeah, so this tank is not really outstandingly bad, but not outstandingly good either. I think we should move on to other statistics, shall we? The first statistical analysis and comparison regarding the mobility could be summarized with simply in the middle of the pack. When we look at the Leclerc S21 in comparison to all the other nations' MBTs, as I did with the Type 10 just a few days ago, you can see that the engine is significantly stronger with 1475, but it's not the strongest, so it's kind of in the middle of the pack. The weight with 56.2 tons is also significantly more than the Type 10, but kind of overall in the middle of the pack. So we have a horsepower to ton ratio of 26.2, which is 100% not bad and in the upper regions, but when it comes to a pure comparison, if we exclude the Challenger 2 TS, because that needs a lorry driver and we know that Britain kind of has its problems with that, well, kind of in the middle of the pack. Top speed, same story, 71 kilometers per hour, nothing wrong with that, and the reverse speed, some nice minus 37, but it's not as quick as the Type 10, so no French memes there. The neutral steering exists, but it is as usual with the current patch and the current resistance in War Thunder, especially regarding the rubber padding of Western MBTs, kind of sluggish and doesn't really reflect the horsepower to ton ratio even on a paved road. When we talk about the business end of the Leclerc S21, we can look at the 120mm Chia CN120-26 F1 cannon, where you can fire 40 rounds of ammunition. As I said in the first look at it, the ready rack fields 22 rounds plus 1 in the breech, so over half of this can be taken into battle without the ammo rack in the hull. The reload is an autoloader with 6 seconds, which is again kinda in the middle of the pack, and yeah, I felt the difference really to the Type 10. And then we have the turret rotational speed, which again seems to be a bit lacking. It is the joint lowest with only 30 degrees per second, but again, it's not really something bad. The gun depression is minus 8 degrees, and that is a bit more than the Type 10, but the Type 10 has hydropneumatic suspension, which the Leclerc S21 does not have, so you're getting stuck with that. And your gun elevation is kind of the golden average of 20, and that is definitely a difference to the Type 10, even though that one would have hydropneumatic suspension, as I just said. The elevation speed is not the best, but way ahead of some of the worst, such as the Chinese ZTZ 99.3. 36 degrees per second gives you really this high-tier Call of Duty feeling, and that just leaves the Leclerc in a bit of a interesting spot, to say the least. And we come to this back in just the conclusion part, but first let's have a look at the ammunition. The first out of the 3 available shell types that I want to present to you is the OCC 120 G1 stock HEATFS round. With a muzzle velocity of 1100 meters per second, it's just about the fastest in this comparison, and with 480 millimeters of penetration at all ranges, it is the standard NATO heat penetration. So HEATFS, in a nutshell, it does very well versus lightly protected targets and has therefore a harder hitting power than APFSDS if you do not dead right center kill the crew or blow up the ammunition, and it does really struggle therefore against any sort of era protection, any sort of composite armor, which has overall better values against heat than it does versus APFSTS to begin with, and also it struggles in close quarters environments like we usually have in War Thunder versus bushes, trees, fence and other obstacles alike that are in your line of fire. And unlike some of your ancient predecessors, you don't have a coaxial 20mm to get rid of all the stuff in the line of fire. So there is definitely the need for an upgrade in the shape of the tier 1 APFSTS, which is the OFL 120 G1. 1780 meters per second really propels it in the upper echelons of the high mass velocity APFSTS, but the penetration is not really that great with only 425 millimeters, and that is far off any sort of comparable stock round to the Type 10, for example, which has 481. So even in that aspect, the Type 10 beats the Leclerc S21 flat dead. However, it's better than nothing, and it is usable for the majority of situations, and it will do versus the usual weak spots of high tier MBTs such as the turret ring, the gun breech area, the driver's hatch and also the lower glacis, and will do just fine for side shots versus the majority of era protection with certain Russian exceptions. Finally, the third shell type is the tier 4 upgrade OFL 120 F1 APFSTS, and with a muzzle velocity of 1790 meters per second, you have probably the best APFSTS to hit targets at long range, but the penetration in comparison is a bit lacking with only 575. Also, this tank gets in this case beaten by quite a considerable margin by the Type 10's Type 10 with 615. This is not a bad shell, let me clarify this, but it's just not as good as other things in War Thunder that have been around for quite a while or have been upgraded when it comes to the tanks with new ammunition, such as the M1A2. And I think that this shell will, as usual, do just fine versus the weak spots, but therefore the upgrade from the G1 to the F1 is not as urgent as for probably some other tanks when they go from their tier 1 APFSTS to their tier 4 upgrade APFSTS. And that just is kind of dictating the verdict for the Leclerc S21. So when it comes to the final verdict on the Leclerc S21, I have to say that this tank at this very moment is not really worth getting, simply because its predecessor, the Leclerc S2, is basically the same tank minus the thermal imaging for the commander's optic, and I really don't think that this is worth all the silver lines and all the 400,000 RP and yet another stock grind for this tank just right now. If Gaijin will add a new top shell or buff the armor or make this tank in any way, shape or form different, maybe even by lowering the battle rating, I don't know, then yeah, maybe. And I guess a lot of French mains will still go for this tank because maybe there is a better version after that. I actually don't know. And the problem is that a lot of people right now go for the Type 10, which is objectively in many aspects that matter a bit more, like the reload and also the penetration of the top APFSTS round, just better, and that at the same battle rating. So not really a reason to get this tank. I'm not saying that the Leclerc is in any way, shape or form a bad tank. It is fast, it is maneuverable, it has decent gun handling, and it has decent firepower, but overall it's on the less spectacular side of the average branch of the comparison, as you just could see. So I cannot really look at this tank and say, yep, that's worth going for. When you have to invest into your grind for one tank, then at the moment I wouldn't go for the Leclerc S21. It could change in the future, there might be some potential left, but at the moment it's okay, I guess. Definitely not bad. I still like the look of it, and that's probably the most outstanding thing that I can talk about this tank. And that has been my tank review on the Leclerc S21, and I hope you enjoyed it. I put a lot of work into it, so give it a thumbs up. For you it's just a click. For me it means the world. Subscribe and hit the bell if you like that style of tank review. Also let me know in the comment section down below if you want to see more. And as usual, we will see each other on the waves in the skies and on the battlefields of War Thunder.